Hello and welcome to Pathonomics. This is my first attempt at a video and we are talking about the Twitter's recommendation algorithm which got released in full open sourced on March 31st, and I've had some time to look at it and there's some parts which are better than I expected and some parts which are exactly as I expected. And we're going to talk about what makes it good and bad, and try not to dive too deep, but maybe catch a little bit of code as well. So the first question that's important to address before we start is, what is even the criteria for what makes a good social media algorithm? So I want to pull up some notes here. So when we talk about algorithms in college, we talk about efficiency. You sort a trillion numbers quickly. Great, you've passed the test. But here the question is not efficiency. It's, does it do the correct thing? And defining what the correct thing is, or is itself a challenge? It's the majority of the challenge. And what should the goal of the algorithm be in the first place? So things like efficiency or understandability, while valuable to look at, is not really the issue here. Understandability is an issue because if it's hard to understand, likely it is doing something strange. Like good algorithms of this sort should be very legible, like as legible as, say, like the Bitcoin algorithm, but it's not. So Elon's goal, or one of his many goals, is, does the algorithm improve on regretted user minutes? This is an okay goal. There's lots of good in this, in that this specifically targets on kind of the world. It specifically looks at a user and says, do they enjoy spending time on the site, even after reflection? Looking back at their years on the site, would they look at that with positive emotion? This is a good goal. It's hard to A/B test it. It's hard to measure it because you can't wait for years for users to look back. You can sometimes A/B test by asking people to move away from Twitter and see what they feel, or use it more and see how they feel. But I think there's other goals that are worth looking at that are in kind of the similar style, but not exactly unregretted user minutes. I'll talk about contractual fulfillment and incentives. But before that, there's a big part of what I would consider the algorithm that isn't published. And this is a big kind of transparency question. And that is, what are the criteria for the A/B tests that determine algorithm changes? So I've worked for Bing, I work for Amazon, and people can make all kinds of changes to the algorithm, and nobody's going to agree on what's a good change until they test it. And test in production, get some users on the old one, get some users on the new one, and then look at metrics which may have gone up and down since then. So the first question is, what are the metrics looked at within the A/B tests? And what is the decision criteria of which metrics are the most important for these A/B tests? These are not published, and these are in some ways quite important to understand how this algorithm arrived in the first place. So when people say Twitter optimizes for engagement, it kind of does in terms of its, like, the internal optimization loop. Maybe looking at engagement and saying, okay, more engagement on this tweet means it's a better tweet. But also it's important to look at the external optimization loop to see, of comparing two algorithms, what is Twitter's developers' outside view on these? Are we looking at the likes? Are we looking at time spent on the site? Like, if they're looking at likes, then this is a good thing. If they're looking at time spent on the site, this is a bad thing. It's basically my thing. Partially because if likes are probably more correlated with unregretted user minutes, than time spent, which is maybe negatively correlated with algorithm using. But the goals that what I think is worth putting as high as I'm going to use in minutes, or as sub goals, is contractual fulfillment. Like, does the site perform roughly what users expect it to perform? Now, people have different expectations, but one example of where it violates this expectation is that it pushes a lot of outside of your network recommendations on your feed. Now, maybe people expect that, and maybe people like some of it, but the complaint that I see, and I also have, is that the out-of-network tweets, there's too many of them. So it doesn't do what people expect. The second question of expectations is more of it's unclear what a like does within the algorithm to the user. Now, open sourcing is a good step towards understanding this, but it's not legible to you. Like, what does this like represent in terms of the relationship? How does the relationship alter between me and the person I'm liking? So it is important, but I would say that the most important thing for me is, and then for the world as well, is what incentives does the algorithm produce? Does it incentivize good behavior? And good behavior is a number of related things. I don't mean like just politeness, although politeness is important. Politeness is very important. It's also like, do you aim towards truthfulness? Do you aim towards usefulness? Do you aim towards things that uplift one another? Or you could do the opposite examples of, do you aim to increase anger? Do you aim to increase hostility of different people? So I'm gonna take a wild guess here, is that Twitter algorithm can be vastly improved in this category. And there's one category which is obvious, which is the quote tweets problem. And that is, from what I've seen, quote tweets are counted about the same as retweets, when retweet is a positive signal and quote tweet is a frequently negative signal. And so quote tweeting is a bad, like, it shouldn't be counted as a positive sign. It's a little bit like if Twitter paid people to kick puppies, you would say, wait a second, this is bad, Twitter, you shouldn't pay people to kick puppies. Don't teach them to do this. But if it's kicking other people, you create a certain incentive for hate engagements to propagate. And I think that's bad. Now, there is a question that some people might ask to me as a critic of like, oh, you can criticize all you want, but can you build a better algorithm? And so yes, I can. So if you're Elon looking at this video and you want to go the easy and cheap way to fix your entire site, then I have implemented a superior ranking algorithm for Twitter. It's based on a proprietary implementation of TrustRank, which is my invention. It's called Cozy Twitter, and it's an extension. If you're reading this after reading or listening to this after April 3rd, it's not going to work because Twitter API is blocked and behind the unreasonable paywall. But yes, I have an algorithm which solves all of these problems effectively, like contractual fulfillment, incentives, and optimization structure of society pretty well. And it does it at a fairly cheap cost. If you don't count the exuberant API call pricing. So yes, I can definitely make a better algorithm. I will not talk about what that is. I will talk about ways that Twitter algorithm is like worse than this. So one sign of what makes kind of a core algorithm good or bad is whether you need ad hoc improvements. So, there's a lot of talk about censorship, right? There's a lot of talk about some people want to censor other people on Twitter. To me, this is in some ways a failure of the algorithm, that it didn't properly kind of separate people into camps where they don't see each other's info. If people are fighting for a censorship of a local space that is jointly owned, like maybe they shouldn't jointly own the space, maybe they should have their own spaces, and then the fight will subside. So to me, a big fight over censorship is in some sense a failure of properly there's too many incentives to block people on Twitter from Twitter's own power level. And this to me is saying that Twitter is promoting some content to some people who don't want to see it. And as a result, those people want to censor it. So this is kind of a big ad hoc involvement, which is pointing to me there's kind of strangeness in the algorithm. I mean, even something like we don't want to show tweets from the same user too much. There's an ad hoc change after the core algorithm. It's like, wait a second, if this person is tweeting a lot and they're really good, why don't you want to show it? Why isn't diversity already a byproduct of a previous function that's already working correctly? If you need to add it, it's not working correctly. So this is the kind of questions of there is a lot of problems in the core algorithm if you have to patch it a lot at the end. Okay, and then the question of what makes a good algorithm is how does it actually affect society? So there's a lot of talk about social media actually hurting people's mental health. And Zuckerberg went in front of Congress and said, look, passive consumption of Facebook hurts people's mental health, or something along those lines. And there's very few follow-up questions to that, which to me is wait, what? Can this be measured? Can you do A/B tests on, if people quit all social media for 2 weeks, do we see a marked improvement in their mental health markers? And I think some people have done these tests and they have said yes. And so this to me is pointing that something in the algorithm is actually pointing to a certain destruction of people's expectations of what discourse ought to be. And this is specifically related to passive consumption, so it must be a situation of people who are not very heavy users, who are reading stuff and getting discouraged for some reason. So this feels to me like an algorithm problem, believe it or not. This feels fixable as well at the algorithm level. And the other part of the optimizational directionality is the question of is society as a whole getting more cohesive as a result of this algorithm? Are people liking each other more after interacting with Twitter? Or, do you go on Twitter, you get angry, and then you come back to life, you're still angry, and then you hate the people who you've talked to, who you brought closer together, who you brought farther apart. And there's definitely times where Twitter mobs who cancel people is a thing, and it is a thing that is now gives people pause to do stuff in the workplace or online which would have been okay before. And this cancel culture didn't originate with Twitter. It's not only a Twitter thing, but this hostility which may discourage a lot of people from either starting new businesses or putting themselves out there may actually be pretty negative. So this encouragement of Twitter mobs may be a bad thing. Okay, and then there's also a question of ranking where it's what are you ranking? Tweets are being ranked Is that the right thing? Like, do you want to rank conversations? Do you want to rank people? Do you want to rank communities? Okay. So things I'm not going to talk about is which team is the algorithm on. There's people trying to look for, is Republican, is Democrat in the code base, and maybe they'll find something, but it seems like they found some debug features which were related to that. And then people were looking for kind of gotchas of, is this biased towards my team or against my team, so I can go complain on Twitter about it. I don't think there's much of that, and nor do I think, like, Elon probably fixed a lot of that if there was any before open sourcing, and I think the questions that are remaining is far more meta questions of like, how do we manage the power level differential between power users and new users? Or how do we manage trust? Do we propagate trust to the network, or is every like the same symbol of trust? Or how do we manage time? What is the decay of time? And these are very important questions, and these affect society if you make a pretty substantial statement on them. Okay, so next thing, we're gonna go through this blog post, and that'll be the end of part 1. Okay, so our recommendation system is composed of many interconnected services and jobs. Why don't we have one service? Like, and I know it's a lot, but like philosophically, I would love for this to be a single service, single job too. So you can like separate all the business code from the efficiency code and like know what exactly is happening. But okay. These models aim to answer important questions about Twitter network. What is the probability you interact with another user in the future? Oh boy. So this question already is poorly posed, because the probability that you will interact with another user in the future depends on the algorithm itself. It's not an isolated like thing in there. It's not like the probability of rain tomorrow, which is unaffected by what you're doing right now. Or maybe it is affected by what you're doing right now, doing something drastic. But you know what I mean. The situation here is, if this is what you're computing, you are doing some self-referential thing that is extremely hard to evaluate. Now, what I think they may have meant is that, what is the probability that you interact with this tweet given that we show it to you? Which is a far more reasonable question to compute and a far more reasonable thing to have in your network. But this depends on the algorithm itself. This is, it's a bad idea to do this unless you really know what you're doing. I don't think they do. Okay, we fetch the best tweets. We rank the tweets. Okay. Apply heuristics and filters. This is again an example of if these are overly complex, something may have gotten wrong at these two stages. Okay, look at the custom thing. This is actually less complicated than I thought, which is a good thing. This could be much worse. But we have in-network things. We have kind of out-of-network things. We have their like main ranker, which combines the two, and then we have kind of their ad hoc heuristics finished. This is a good graph. I like it. Okay, so today for you, timeline consists of 50% network tweets and 50% out-of-network tweets. What? Why? Like, really? Why is this so high? This is not what I want. If I want somebody, I'll follow them. Like, you could follow so many accounts. If I like somebody's and I see their tweets, like this should be like 10%, 5%. Like, is this a target that was decided through a hard code? Or is this an emergent property of other algorithms? Because if it's an emergent property, I bet there's a bug in some of the issue. This can't be the proper way to like manage things. Like this is what people complain all the time. Like something is wrong if this is the case, basically. Okay, let's do the in-network thing. In-network shows largest content source and aims to deliver most relevant person to assume to follow. Okay. A real graph is a model which predicts likelihood of engagement between two users. Okay. I want to read the real graph paper pretty quick because this sentence is like confusing because likelihood of engagement depends on the algorithm itself. The real graph paper is a little bit more sane. Okay, let's look at this. So, these interactions provide a window into understanding the strength on Twitter. We want to assign a quantitative strength value for each directional pairwise connection on Twitter. I like this. I mean, this is like friendships are not the same, strengths not the same. You don't want to treat them as the same. Like the idea here is good. Okay. I wish they would like talk less about the implementation details and tell me what exactly it's doing. Okay. Okay, let's look at edge features. One direction follows, two direction follows, mutuals, SMS follow, okay. Visible interactions, retweets, favorites, mentions, messages, implicit interactions, clicks or visits profile page. Why is visits profile page a thing? Like, is this like a common interaction? Like, is this a thing like worth like arising to optimize for? Like, if I know somebody, I'm not going to visit their profile page very often. Like maybe I want to see the latest tweets, but if maybe I'm relying on the For You file. Like this is a very strange thing. Like I'm going to visit people who I don't know. Like this is not a great thing to have. We'll come back to that question. Okay. We calculate several times the question of frequency, intensity, and recency interaction when it happens. This is important. A daily exponential delayed interaction. Okay, so this is the big question for Twitter of what it wants to be as a social network. This is a big question of how it sees love in the future. Is this a news sharing site or do you want to be an everything app? Okay, Elon wants to be an everything app, and I will tell you, you're not going to be an everything app with a massive delay of daily exponential interaction count. Okay, now let's come back here. What is happening here? Twitter values interactions, which happened recently. And if it happened 2 days ago, it's exponentially worse than it's happened, 1 day ago. But 3 days ago, it's actually worse than 2 days ago. So it seems Like, sure, the number of days when such interaction happens, the number of mean variance interaction counts, those are not like exponential, so maybe those are like more okay. Number of days since last interaction of this type. Okay, so if somebody hasn't talked to somebody in 30 days, then maybe they're not as friendly as somebody who talks every week. Number of days since first interaction of this type happened. Like, sure. Okay. So you start interacting, then do you keep interacting, and at what frequency? Like these all sound good, but like the moment you start getting exponential decay, and we'll also get into another feature. So, okay, so what is happening here? We have a bunch of features. We that focus on interaction, including some features which will look at like bias various interaction very heavily. We kind of, it's unclear what the training of this is doing, but okay. We create a certain like score of a person-to-person, what they call it, weight, like a person-to-person tie. Like this is your friendship score. This is your friendship level. Like 1 to 10, how good of a friend you are. Then we compute personalized page rank. I really like this. This is extremely positive thinking. Whoever came up with this is good. Like, okay, it's not as good as trust rank, which is what I came up with, but this is like on the way there. So, so not only this is page rank where it says like, okay, if A interacted with B and B interacted with C, that means sort of A is kind of wants to interact with C. It's not just the global page rank, it's the personalized page rank, which is important. It's good. And then you have a similarity. So, okay, we'll look into that in a second. So, okay, so you have this kind of PageRank is a good algorithm. PageRank is basically a implementation of what we call status, right? Like a local status question of who is cool in your community. However, the issue is the input to this is gone through this real graph edges, which is highly biased towards recent interactions. So as a result, this status function is extremely biased towards people who interact with the site all the time, which may be what Twitter wants as an addicting platform, but this is not like a platform for like casual users. Basically, it's very hard to gain status if you're a casual user, because of like everything runs through stuff like exponential decay interaction count. Okay. Okay, it's still hard to understand what exactly this is, so I'm going to skip this part. This looks about evaluation of individual features, which is okay. But what I would love to see, and actually let's take a look quickly at the code for not the bitrate, the real graph. Okay, so to create label dataset, the algorithm first selects a set of candidates interaction, then find all edges that were active during a certain time period. You join this candidate with a set of label interaction that occurred one day after the candidate period. So again, this is what I'm talking about. Like, it's it seems like to me that if you interact with somebody on Monday, Wednesday, Friday of every week, then this algorithm will not pick it up as an interaction at all, effectively. It's like you have to interact with somebody Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, consecutive days, and then it will sort of learn that, okay, you guys' interaction actually matters in some sense. So this one day after the candidate period is an extreme bias towards interactions which occur in consecutive days. Again, which to somebody like a casual user who does not want to be on Twitter all the time is, you know, it's not friendly to this person. Like, maybe do 1 week after the candidate period. Okay, asking an active user to log in at least once a week, that's reasonable. Every day, I don't think it is. So maybe Twitter is not built for non-casual users. Maybe that's not what you want. But if you want to be like a more inclusive platform to all types of interaction, or people who don't, people whose social network doesn't have to tweet every day, then you would want to change this, or like do some sort of decay, which is not a big decay. So let's see. We're actually going to end part 1 because it's already been 30 minutes, and we'll continue in part 2.